Hi, welcome back to Gamewriter Bites, and I'm going to be touching on comedy a little today because it's something that it plays a big part in my work. So I'm likely to come back a number of times to touch on this. But today, Jacob Steen Madsen asked if I would cover something on good and bad examples of comedy, and that's quite difficult because comedy is very subjective in many respects. And I wouldn't like to label anything particularly as bad if it's just really down to taste. I mean, for instance, I never quite got why Leisure Suit Larry was so popular, but that isn't necessarily bad comedy, it's just personal taste. And sometimes humour falls flat because the developer didn't quite manage to convey the right intent. I mean, intentional bad spelling or grammar in on-screen text may have had the intent of being funny, but doesn't necessarily come across as humour unless you manage to convey why you're doing that. So you've got to be very careful with things like that. And one particular thing that I found more frustrating than bad, and certainly, sort of in general, the comedy was pretty good, and that was in the recent Sam and Max games. And there was one episode in particular where the player is asked to create a comedy scene in a TV show by choosing the right lines of dialogue. And by the time I'd failed this about 3 times, I just found it extremely unfunny because the jokes had been repeated and often. I mean, that may be my failing as a game player, but it just frustrated me too much to be funny after the first time round. Now, good comedy often comes from great characters coming together in situations and the lines they are given in those situations. Take the first meeting between George and Sergeant Moo, for example, in Broken Sword, or the opening exchange between Manny and Eva in Grim Fandango. Now, those are just brilliant examples of the way that characters come together in a funny situation, but so much of that is in the delivery of the lines, and choosing great actors to deliver those lines is really important. And I find that that's particularly true in my approach to comedy, which often relies on the delivery of the line as much as the line itself. And if you don't get the right character, the right actor to deliver the lines for the character, then sort of a lot of that will just not work at all. Many people may regard that as poor comedy, which will be fair enough, and certainly, sort of like I have had instances where the right actor wasn't chosen, and it's frustrating sometimes, but you can't always get what you want. But sometimes the best comedy isn't from the writing itself; it's from something visual, which obviously the idea has to come from somewhere, and it has to be written down into some sort of document before it's put together. But one of the best was actually in Beneath Steel Sky, and although I worked on this game, obviously I'm maybe a little biased. I had nothing to do with this particular incident, and what I'm talking about is when the little dog was actually dumped into the pond because you need to get him out of the way, or cause a distraction rather. But not only was this actually a culmination of a good puzzle, which meant that the payoff of the humour was actually put into the hands of the player, but it was just such a good visual payoff as well. I mean, it wasn't just a case of flipping the dog into the nearby pond. Sort of when that happened, the dog shot off the screen for a few seconds and before coming down really, with a huge splash into the pond, which just timed so well, and at the time, sort of like a lot of work had actually been put in by the animator, and it was brilliant. And I really wish I had thought of that